I had just finished delivering our quarterly report, a detailed, data-driven presentation showcasing how Summit Tech Solutions had surpassed $660 million in revenue. The final slide, a bold graph titled Q3 Revenue Surge, still lit the conference room behind me when Mark Henderson, our newly appointed CEO, stood up. He adjusted his cufflinks with precision, then cleared his throat. Before we wrap up, I have an important announcement regarding our leadership. Mark began, his smile tight and unreadable. The room quieted. Some executives exchanged uncertain glances. Effective immediately, Daniel Reynolds will be stepping down as Chief Operating Officer. His contributions have been invaluable, and we thank him for his service, Mark continued. He paused for emphasis. As we transition into a faster-paced, more scalable phase, we need to make decisions quickly and with less delay. While Daniel's strategic approach served us well, we now require greater agility. A heavy silence filled the room, less shock than quiet resignation. Mark's gaze landed on me. Last week, you mentioned caution around hiring and focusing on development before scaling. That mindset had its time, but now we move forward differently. Thank you, Daniel. Without waiting for a response, he moved on to the next slide titled Phase 3, Structural Optimization. I nodded subtly, masking the storm inside. I stood, not defeated, but poised, ready for what came next. 3 months before that pivotal board meeting, when Mark Henderson was brought in as the new CEO of Summit Tech Solutions, I already sensed that the landscape was changing. Mark's background was unmistakable, a fast-paced, venture capital-driven mentality that prioritized quick wins, rapid expansion, and the inevitability of exit strategies. Unlike the steady, thoughtful growth I had cultivated over years, Mark's approach was all about spreadsheets, aggressive forecasts, and a relentless drive to scale without looking back. From day one, it was clear that I wasn't a partner in his vision. In his eyes, I was more of an impediment, a bottleneck slowing down progress. Our values and approaches clashed. Where I valued relationships, institutional knowledge, and strategic patience, he saw only hurdles and delays. What he didn't realize, and perhaps never cared to, was the sheer magnitude of what I had built. The late nights, the painstaking negotiations, the endless problem-solving that had turned Summit Tech from a fledgling startup into a $660 million powerhouse. 7 years earlier, I had launched our first proprietary software product, a flagship offering that put us ahead of the competition and laid the groundwork for our growth. I had designed and implemented the entire operations framework from the ground up. Every workflow, every vendor relationship, every contingency plan bore my fingerprints. When the original CEO had abruptly stepped down in the middle of a crisis, I took the helm in all but title, steering the company through the storm with grit and steady hands. Respect was what I expected. Recognition was a bonus I never demanded. But the subtle signs that my role was diminishing became impossible to ignore. Meetings I once led were now convened without me. Strategies I had meticulously crafted were quietly shelved without discussion. The social fabric of the executive team was fraying. I was slowly being cut out. One afternoon, I overheard a conversation that confirmed my suspicions. Mark's executive assistant was on the phone scheduling lunch with one of our largest vendors, Pinnacle Systems, the same vendor I had worked with directly for over 6 years. "We want to ease Daniel out quietly," she said. "Make it smooth, no drama." They thought they were playing a clever game, keeping things under wraps. But I'd been preparing for this moment for a long time. Months before, I had been closely monitoring Pinnacle's financial health. Their balance sheets hinted at instability, and through careful channels, I learned they were open to acquisition offers. About a year prior, I had established a holding company, Horizon Capital LLC, a vehicle for strategic investments and acquisitions. Through a trusted private equity friend from my business school days, I quietly made an offer to acquire Pinnacle. The deal was structured cleanly and discreetly, designed to stay below the radar of Summit Tech's leadership. So when Mark began pushing Pinnacle's leadership for hurried contract concessions, he was politely, but firmly, informed that all negotiations would now be handled through new ownership. He had no idea that new owner was me. That day in the conference room, when Mark announced my removal as COO with a smug smile, I simply nodded. While he thought he was removing an obstacle, I was quietly buying the foundation upon which his future plans depended. Back in my office, I methodically packed my belongings. A framed photo of my family, the silver pin my team gifted me when we hit the $660 million revenue milestone, and a dog-eared copy of the Lean Startup filled with my scribbled notes and ideas. I placed everything carefully into a box and paused, staring out through the floor-to-ceiling glass windows at the Chicago skyline shimmering in the afternoon light. Across the hall, I saw Mark laughing with the CFO, clearly confident he'd won the day. But tomorrow, the real game would begin. By Friday morning, the corporate quiet was broken by a cold, clinical email from HR with a subject line, "Transition Plan." The message was just as sterile. "Daniel, please complete the attached checklist by 6 p.m. today. Your severance and benefits will be processed accordingly. Also, CEO Mark Henderson has requested your assistance in drafting a knowledge transfer document for your replacement." I chuckled softly, fired publicly, then asked for a favor, as if we were old colleagues swapping pleasantries. I responded professionally. "Kelly, I will ensure all deliverables are prepared and documented. Regards, Daniel Reynolds." But this wasn't mere politeness. It was a calculated move. Every document I handed over would be organized and thorough, but intentionally vague, just enough to keep Summit Tech dependent on Pinnacle Systems, the vendor they no longer controlled. At 10:25 a.m., my attorney Sarah called with a note of amused urgency. "They're starting to notice." A junior procurement manager from Summit Tech reached out to Pinnacle asking why next quarter's delivery schedule hasn't been finalized. Pinnacle responded that, due to a recent change in ownership, all communications will now be directed through Horizon Capital. I leaned back in my chair, eyes fixed on the stack of awards I hadn't yet packed. Recognitions for cost efficiency, strategic planning, and operational excellence, all earned under my leadership. They had appreciated my work, until I became inconvenient. That evening, I met Marcus, a longtime friend and confidant, at our favorite steakhouse. Sliding into our usual booth, he whispered, words out. Mark was cocky all morning, but around 3 p.m., something shifted. He looked rattled. I stirred my drink slowly, a faint smile crossing my lips. "Pinnacle," he nodded. "They were supposed to finalize the contract this week, but legal kicked it back. Ownership transfer flagged. Mark's demanding answers." I smiled just enough for him to notice. "He doesn't know it's me, does he?" "Not yet," Marcus replied. "And you're not telling him." Saturday morning, I received an email from Jeffrey, Summit Tech's procurement lead. "Daniel, despite how things ended, I was hoping we could discuss the Pinnacle contract. There's some internal confusion, and you're the only one who handled negotiations. Would you be open to a quick call?" I didn't reply. Not out of spite, but because it was no longer my responsibility. Instead, Sarah sent a formal notice on behalf of Horizon Capital LLC to Summit Tech's executive team, making it clear that all further vendor negotiations would be routed through our new client relations lead me. Sunday night, just after 8 p.m., my phone buzzed with an unknown number. One voicemail. It was Mark Henderson. I didn't listen. Sarah had warned me, let your silence be the loudest voice in the room. The following Monday hit Summit Tech like a thunderclap. Their internal vendor dashboard flashed red alerts. Unconfirmed supplier contract for the next quarter were pending approval. Without these, 5 major product lines would grind to a halt. By 9:50 a.m., Marcus texted. Mark stormed into the all-hands meeting. Nobody knows what's happening. He looks exhausted. By 10:40 a.m., LinkedIn buzzed with news. Pinnacle Systems announces new ownership by Horizon Capital LLC. The press release promised renewed commitment to enterprise solutions, but made no mention of me. It didn't need to. At 11:08 a.m., I received a terse email from Mark. "We need to talk urgently." I forwarded it immediately to Sarah. 15 minutes later, she called, laughing. "He's panicking. He just realized you bought the kingdom he thought he ruled." But the real leverage I held was still hidden from Mark. Pinnacle wasn't just any vendor. They provided the critical data infrastructure powering Summit Tech's flagship AI-driven operations platform. The project Mark had staked his entire reputation on. Without Pinnacle's proprietary modules, the whole launch would collapse before it even began. From my apartment, overlooking the city, I listened to footsteps echoing outside my door. My office gear still packed by the door, undecided whether to unpack or give it away. It didn't matter anymore. On paper, I no longer worked at Summit Tech. In reality, Summit Tech now worked for me. Tuesday morning arrived with a sense of quiet dread hanging over Summit Tech Solutions. Even though I had been formally removed from my role, the ripples of my quiet maneuver were becoming impossible for the company to ignore. Though I no longer had access to Summit Tech's internal systems, the unfolding crisis was evident through a mixture of public signals and trusted insiders who kept me informed. LinkedIn was buzzing with activity, project managers updating their profiles to open to work, and AI engineers posting cryptic messages that hinted at unrest within the company. The signs were unmistakable. The house I had built was shaking under the weight of leadership failures. The real pressure cooker was an emergency leadership meeting scheduled for 10 a.m., mandatory attendance. Marcus, my longtime friend and confidant, sent me a message just before it began. Mark Henderson is visibly sweating. Literally, you could see the tension as he walked into the room. He looks like a man who just received a resignation letter written in blood. I smiled quietly, sipping my coffee. This wasn't about revenge or schadenfreude. It was about watching the board finally recognize the depth of their mistake. They had entrusted leadership to a man who couldn't think 3 moves ahead. Later that day, my attorney, Sarah, and I put the finishing touches on the licensing agreement that Summit Tech was being pushed to accept. She leaned over the contract and commented, "This is generous." We even included an 8-month grace period at their previous rates to make the switch easier. "They won't see it that way," I replied firmly. "But it's fair. This isn't punishment. It's protection of what we built." Austin, our CTO, joined us with a live client dashboard open on his laptop. Since the press release, we've had inquiries from 12 enterprise clients, including some of Summit Tech's direct competitors. I recognized several names immediately. I leaned in heart steady. For years, I had chased those clients while at Summit Tech with no success. Now, they were coming to us, not because of flashy marketing or slick presentations, but because they finally understood the value I had always preached. It wasn't about the brand. It was about the work. That Friday, the board convened an emergency session. Marcus kept me updated throughout the day. "Mark's out. Legal's involved. He just realized DevOps copied you on the repository before he left. Time-stamped proof you acted in good faith. He's falling apart." The word unraveling echoed in my mind. I didn't feel triumphant, only a sense of closure. This wasn't about payback. It was about respect. For years, I'd built something others try to claim, erase, or minimize. That evening, Summit Tech's legal team sent an unexpected message. They acknowledged receipt of our licensing proposal, but declined outright acceptance, asking instead to discuss alternative terms. In other words, they hoped I would blink. I did not. Sarah's reply was clear and firm. As outlined, our licensing terms are non-negotiable unless accompanied by a significant equity stake or a formal acquisition offer. We understand if Summit Tech wishes to explore other vendors, but there are no alternatives. Pinnacle is not merely a component. It is the system. Rebuilding would take over 20 months, time they don't have. That evening, I walked the halls of Horizon Capital's new downtown Chicago headquarters, now also home to Pinnacle Systems. Construction crews were finishing the glass walls of the strategy lab. Engineers arranged whiteboards, set up displays. The energy felt electric. For the first time in months, I felt at home again. Just then, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. One voicemail. I pressed play. Mark's voice came through, strained and uncertain. "Daniel, I think we need to start over." I wasn't sure what his endgame was anymore, but one thing was clear. His reckless actions were endangering the people who had stood by him for years. He used to be better than this. Now, his arrogance, thinly disguised as concern, only made me shake my head. "Sure, I had made mistakes, but I wasn't the one who dismantled the foundation. Mark had fired me publicly, pushed through reckless expansion plans, slashed onboarding and QA budgets, and ended remote work in the name of productivity. When senior developers began walking away, he blamed me. Now, suddenly, he was playing the victim. But Mark's real worry wasn't the team. It was the board. Marcus confirmed that the next morning, Mark tried to spin the vendor crisis as market volatility. The board didn't buy it. They demanded a full audit of supplier dependencies. Mark stalled, so they brought in an external audit counsel. It was unraveling fast, and I think Mark knew it. Around noon, an email arrived in my inbox. Subject: immediate assistance requested. Jack Thompson, chairman of Summit Tech's board, wrote, Dr. Reynolds, on behalf of the board of directors, we request a confidential meeting at your earliest convenience. We are reviewing leadership's handling of key strategic partnerships and believe your insights will aid our assessment. Please advise a suitable time. That was interesting. I replied promptly, Mr. Thompson, I am available later this week. Thursday or Friday morning works well. Please advise your preference. Respectfully, Daniel Reynolds, Managing Partner, Horizon Capital. As I clicked send, I leaned back and glanced at a framed quote on my shelf, a gift from a former engineer at Summit Tech. Be the kind of leader your future self won't have to apologize for. I had no apologies to make. Mark played politics. I built power. The game wasn't over. Thursday morning arrived crisp and clear, the kind of early spring day in Chicago that seemed to crackle with possibility. I dressed deliberately for the occasion. A tailored navy suit with clean lines, silver cufflinks that caught the light, and my grandfather's vintage watch resting on my wrist. The ensemble wasn't about style. It was a statement. I didn't work for Summit Tech anymore, but I intended to show them they wished I did. At exactly 10 a.m., I stepped into a private boardroom on the 29th floor of Halberton Tower, Summit Tech's downtown headquarters. The receptionist greeted me with a polite smile. Dr. Reynolds, they're expecting you. Inside, the boardroom was a study in corporate seriousness. Dark walnut paneling, a large mahogany table, and a carafe of untouched coffee on the sideboard. 7 board members sat waiting, their expressions ranging from neutral to visibly tense. I could tell they weren't sure what version of me they would get, angry, bitter, or defensive. Instead, I brought calm. Thank you for inviting me. I began, shaking hands with Jack Thompson, the board chair. I understand you'd like insight into the current situation with Pinnacle Systems. Jack nodded. It's escalated beyond what we anticipated. I expected as much, I said, placing a slim leather portfolio on the table. Inside, you'll find a detailed timeline of events, email correspondences, and financial documents confirming that Pinnacle Systems was fully acquired by Horizon Capital 2 weeks ago. I paused, letting that sink in. We are now your exclusive provider of critical AI systems architecture and currently own the data modules powering over 70% of your next-gen rollout. A heavy silence settled over the room. The weight of those words was palpable. At the time of acquisition, I continued, I was no longer employed by Summit Tech. Legally, this means there is no conflict of interest, only a failure to identify and mitigate operational risk under your current leadership. A board member in a gray suit leaned forward, skepticism clear in his eyes. Why didn't CEO Henderson flag this acquisition? Perhaps, I replied evenly, because he didn't see it coming. My words landed hard. I watched the shifting expressions, the restless movements as the board processed the implications. Jack cleared his throat. We were told the vendor issues stemmed from Pinnacle overreaching. I shook my head firmly. Pinnacle Systems is more stable today than it has been in 6 years. What's unstable is Mr. Henderson's belief that cutting institutional knowledge would yield stronger outcomes. I let the room settle before adding quietly. Sometimes the bottleneck isn't the one who's slow. It's the one who doesn't understand what they're holding back. There were nods around the table. Some hesitant, some resolute. With the tone set, I opened a folder to reveal detailed financials and timelines, evidence of deliberate operational oversights, rushed expansions, and ignored warnings. I walked them through the chain of events, highlighting decisions that put critical supply chains at risk and ultimately led to the current crisis. We all make mistakes, I said, but true leadership is about accountability and foresight. These documents demonstrate where leadership failed and why immediate corrective action is necessary. The discussion that followed was intense but measured. Board members asked hard questions, probing for gaps, looking to understand how this had been missed under Mark's stewardship. I answered honestly and directly, earning respect in the room with each exchange. After nearly 2 hours, the meeting adjourned with a unanimous request for a full operational audit and a commitment to stabilize vendor relationships immediately. As I stood to leave, Jack shook my hand again. "Dr. Reynolds, thank you. Your insight is invaluable. We may be calling on you again." Outside the boardroom, I allowed myself a brief moment of reflection. This wasn't just a personal victory. It was a reckoning for a company that had lost its way. Back at Horizon Capital, my executive team was already hard at work. We were drafting updated licensing agreements, terms that reflected both fairness and the value of what we controlled. Sarah mentioned, "The terms are generous, including an 8-month grace period to ease the transition, but firm on premium rates moving forward." Austin, the CTO, brought up live data on the client dashboard. Since the acquisition announcement, we've been contacted by a dozen enterprise clients, many direct competitors of Summit Tech. This is more momentum than we've seen in years. I nodded, energized by the progress. Years ago, I had struggled to convince leadership at Summit Tech of the potential in these client relationships. Now, those doors were opening wide. That evening, my phone buzzed with an unexpected call. It was Evelyn, a senior executive I hadn't spoken to in years. We had worked side by side at Summit Tech before she was pushed out in a major shakeup. "I've been watching everything unfold," she said quietly. "You didn't just win, Daniel. You proved that patience, intelligence, and dignity can lead. That it's possible to fight without becoming bitter. That means more than you know, especially for women and older professionals still in tech." Her words stayed with me long after the call ended. This wasn't just a comeback. It was a message that strength and grace could coexist, and that one could lead without shouting, win without revenge. The next day, Summit Tech issued a company-wide announcement. Summit Tech has entered a strategic agreement with Horizon Capital for access to Pinnacle Systems platform. We acknowledge the foundational work of former executives, including Daniel Reynolds, in building the operational systems that continue to shape our market. My name was finally in print, no longer erased or minimized, just there. That was all I needed. Later that evening, I found a small plaque in the Horizon Capital lobby, one I hadn't approved but instantly recognized. The real legacy of innovation isn't the product. It's the people who make it possible. Beneath it, in smaller print, was my name. I stood there, watching the soft reflection of the hallway lights in the glass, feeling the quiet power of having reclaimed my story. The days that followed felt like stepping into a new chapter, one I had written, controlled, and was determined to lead with vision and integrity. At Horizon Capital and Pinnacle Systems' new headquarters in downtown Chicago, energy buzzed in the air. The glass-walled strategy rooms were alive with whiteboard sketches, client data dashboards, and spirited discussions. The team I had carefully assembled shared a common purpose: rebuild better, smarter, and stronger. I held tightly to the lessons learned from my years at Summit Tech Solutions, the triumphs, the setbacks, and especially the quiet moments when I was underestimated or overlooked. This time, the narrative was mine to craft. Austin, our Chief Technology Officer, was a constant source of innovation and insight. Since the announcement, he reported one morning, we've secured contracts with 20 new enterprise clients this quarter alone. That a 40% year-over-year growth. 12 of those clients were former Summit Tech accounts, including some who once shut down our pitches. I smiled at the numbers, but knew the story behind them was far more significant. It wasn't about poaching clients or playing corporate games. It was about the undeniable value our technology and leadership brought to the table. Our core strength lay in the operational systems and AI-powered platforms Pinnacle Systems developed, systems I had nurtured from the very beginning. They weren't just tools. They were the backbone of enterprise success in a rapidly evolving tech landscape. One afternoon, Austin pulled me aside, holding a document that caught me off guard. Summit Tech's legal team just sent over the draft for the public licensing agreement, he said. They actually included your name. I looked at him in disbelief. Not sure I heard you right. You're joking. He shook his head. No joke. They wrote it plain as day. Technology developed by Daniel Reynolds, licensed exclusively through Horizon Capital. Seeing my name in print, officially connected to the work I had built, felt like breathing fresh air after holding it underwater for too long. They had never said it before. Not when I built the system, not when it launched, and not even after it hit 1 million users. But now they were saying it publicly and unequivocally. The impact was immediate. By Tuesday, we were deep in strategy meetings as new clients continued to reach out. The boardroom discussions were no longer about damage control, but about growth strategy, market expansion, and product innovation. The triumph wasn't just professional, it was personal. Later that week, I received a surprise call from Evelyn, a senior leader who had been one of the few allies I'd kept during my time at Summit Tech. I've been watching everything unfold, she said warmly. You didn't just win, Daniel. You showed that intelligence and dignity can lead, that you can fight hard without losing your grace. That means more than you realize, especially for those of us who've faced barriers in this industry. Her words resonated deeply. This wasn't just a story about reclaiming a role or a company. It was about setting a precedent, proving that strength and resilience aren't defined by bitterness or harshness, but by the quiet courage to stand firm. At Horizon Capital, we continued to finalize licensing agreements with former Summit Tech partners. 5 more contracts were signed, including one with Summit Tech's oldest and most loyal collaborator, now fully transitioned to our platform. Each deal was a small victory, but together they formed a powerful narrative, a legacy not of taking, but of building and protecting what was ours. My legal counsel, Sarah, messaged me one afternoon. They'll try to recover. New branding, new leaders, polished PR, but none of it addresses the core issue. They forgot the people who built their foundation. You reminded them, without ever raising your voice. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I sat quietly, reflecting on the journey. All the quiet choices, the restraint, the countless times I stayed composed while others waited for me to snap. It was never about proving something to them. It was about proving something far bigger. That strength and grace aren't opposites. That leadership doesn't require shouting. That you can win without revenge. One evening, as I walked the quiet halls of Horizon Capital's headquarters, my gaze fell on a small plaque near the front entrance. It was new, something I hadn't approved, yet instantly recognized. The real legacy of innovation isn't the product. It's the people who make it possible. Beneath those words, in smaller print, was my name. I stood there for a long moment, watching the soft reflection of the hallway lights ripple across the polished floors. At that moment, a message buzzed on my phone. It was from Amber, one of the last employees to leave Summit Tech, loyal, determined, and long underestimated. I start Monday, she wrote. Thank you for keeping the door open. It feels like I'm coming home. I smiled as I typed back. Welcome back. There's so much more we're going to build. That night, I retrieved a small box from the back of my closet, items from my last day at Summit Tech. Inside were my coffee mug, a farewell note from my team, and the silver pen they gave me when we crossed $660 million in revenue. I held each item carefully, not with sadness, but with clarity. Those years weren't wasted. They built me. They challenged me. They forged my resilience. And they led me here. A year ago, they called me the bottleneck. But they were wrong. I wasn't slowing things down. I was holding everything together. Now I'm creating something better, on my terms, with people who see the vision. This time, my name isn't hidden in the background or squeezed into the margins. It's front and center. Clear, certain, exactly where it belongs. In the months that followed, the transformation I had sparked extended far beyond the walls of Horizon Capital and Pinnacle Systems. The industry itself was beginning to shift influenced not only by the technology we delivered, but by the leadership principles we embodied. Summit Tech's stumble served as a cautionary tale for many. Boards and executives across the sector started to pay closer attention to the true value of institutional knowledge, operational stability, and the human element behind rapid growth strategies. The era of quick exits and spreadsheet-driven decisions was giving way to a more balanced approach, one that valued patience, resilience, and thoughtful leadership. At industry conferences, my name began to appear alongside other respected innovators. Invitations came to speak at panels, lead workshops, and share insights on how to navigate leadership challenges in high-stakes environments. I embraced these opportunities not to boast, but to share hard-earned lessons on the importance of integrity and strategic foresight. I often told audiences that leadership is not about ego or domination, but about stewardship, caring deeply for the people and systems entrusted to you. Success comes not from tearing down, but from building up. Winning doesn't require crushing opponents. It demands creating value so undeniable that others want to follow. Meanwhile, Horizon Capital flourished. Our client roster grew steadily, fueled by trust and long-term partnerships rather than flashy marketing campaigns. The technology Pinnacle systems provided became an industry standard, powering countless enterprises' operations and helping them innovate with confidence. One of the most gratifying aspects of this journey was mentoring emerging leaders, especially women and professionals over 40, who had often been overlooked or underestimated in tech. I saw firsthand how resilience and dignity could open doors previously thought closed, and I made it a mission to support others walking similar paths. Through boardrooms, strategy sessions, and everyday interactions, I championed a culture of respect, collaboration, and continuous learning. I believe that true innovation required diverse voices and experiences, and I worked to create spaces where those voices could be heard. Looking back, the journey from being pushed out of Summit Tech to leading a thriving enterprise wasn't just about reclaiming power or proving doubters wrong. It was about redefining what success means for myself, for my team, and for the industry at large. In the quiet moments, when the city lights shimmered outside my office window and the hum of innovation filled the air, I felt a profound sense of purpose. This was more than a business. It was a legacy of leadership grounded in strength, grace, and unwavering vision. And as the industry continued to evolve, I knew this was only the beginning. As the momentum from our success at Horizon Capital and Pinnacle Systems grew, my focus shifted beyond immediate business wins. I realized that true leadership was about more than quarterly reports and new contracts. It was about B. I dedicated time to cultivating a leadership philosophy grounded in empathy, accountability, and vision. I wanted to create an environment where innovation thrived not because of pressure or fear, but because people felt empowered to contribute their best eye. Recognizing the unique challenges faced by underrepresented groups in tech, I champion initiatives to support women, minorities, and seasoned professionals who often faced bias or barriers to advancement. It was important to me that success be accessible to anyone. Our work caught the attention of industry thought leaders and media alike. I was invited to speak at global technology forums and leadership conferences, where I shared insights on resilience, strategic T. Back at the company, the team's energy was infectious. We pushed boundaries in AI and operational technology, always mindful of how our innovations could make a positive impact on clients. One evening, as I walked through our newly expanded headquarters, I paused in front of a wall dedicated to company values. Phrases like integrity, collaboration, and vision were etched in glass alongside portraits of key team members who embodied these principles. It was a daily reminder that our greatest strength lay not in technology alone, but in the people who brought it to life. Reflecting on the journey from being sidelined at Summit Tech to leading a thriving enterprise, I felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The obstacles had shaped me, but they did not define me. What mattered most was how I chose to respond, with patience, dignity, and unwavering commitment to my principles. This legacy was bigger than me. It was about creating a future where leadership means lifting others up, where success is shared, and where innovation serves a greater good. And in that vision, I found my true purpose. As Horizon Capital and Pinnacle Systems settled into their roles as industry leaders, the horizon ahead looked brighter than ever. The foundation we had built wasn't just solid. It was a launching pad for innovation, growth, and meaningful change. The company culture I had nurtured flourished, one that valued collaboration over competition, transparency over secrecy, and vision over short-term gains. Every department, from engineering to client relations, embodied this spirit. People were encouraged to take risks, learn from mistakes, and push boundaries. Our technology continued to evolve rapidly. Pinnacle's AI-driven platforms set new standards for operational excellence, efficiency, and scalability. Clients saw tangible results, and our reputation grew organically through referrals and partnerships. We weren't chasing hype. We were delivering results that mattered. But beyond products and profits, our influence began to ripple through the wider tech community. I was regularly invited to share our story at conferences, podcasts, and leadership summits. The narrative resonated because it wasn't just about overcoming adversity. It was about redefining leadership itself. The industry was waking up to a new model, one where empathy and strength coexisted, where leaders inspired rather than dictated, and where success was measured by impact as much as income. One afternoon, I received an unexpected email from a young professional who had watched my journey unfold. She wrote about feeling inspired to pursue her own path in tech despite challenges and biases. Messages like hers reinforced why this work mattered. It wasn't just about my story, but about empowering others to write theirs. Internally, we launched programs aimed at nurturing the next generation of leaders. Mentorship circles, leadership workshops, and diversity initiatives became cornerstones of our growth strategy. We believe that a company's strength came from its people, their backgrounds, ideas, and drive. Looking back, the journey had been anything but linear. From being dismissed and pushed out to reclaiming my place at the helm, every twist and turn taught invaluable lessons. I learned that resilience wasn't about brute force, but about steady perseverance and strategic patience. Most importantly, I learned that true leadership was about legacy, the lasting influence you leave on your team, your industry, and your community. Today, as I stand at the intersection of past triumphs and future possibilities, I feel ready for whatever comes next. The company is stronger, the people are empowered, and the vision is clear. This new era isn't just mine, it's ours. And together, we're just getting started. Even as Horizon Capital and Pinnacle Systems celebrated remarkable growth and industry recognition, new challenges emerged, as they always do in the life of any thriving enterprise. The tech landscape was evolving faster than ever, competition intensifying, regulations tightening, and client expectations rising. I knew that resting on past achievements was a luxury we couldn't afford. Sustained success required constant vigilance, adaptability, and a culture that welcomed change as an opportunity rather than a threat. One of the biggest tests came when a major competitor launched an aggressive campaign aimed at undermining Pinnacle's reputation. They questioned our data security protocols and hinted at potential vulnerabilities in our AI platforms. The timing was no coincidence. It was a strategic move designed to shake client confidence and slow our momentum. Instead of reacting defensively, we saw this as a moment to demonstrate transparency and strength. We invited independent auditors to rigorously review our systems, openly sharing results with our clients and stakeholders. This openness not only dispelled doubts, but reinforced trust, turning a potential crisis into a defining moment of integrity. Internally, I doubled down on investing in talent and innovation. We launched a company-wide initiative called Future Forward, aimed at fostering creative problem-solving and cross-functional collaboration. Teams were encouraged to experiment with emerging technologies, from machine learning advancements to blockchain applications, positioning us at the forefront of industry trends. At the same time, I prioritized well-being and work-life balance, understanding that sustainable performance depended on the health and happiness of our people. Remote work options were refined, mental health resources expanded, and leadership training emphasized empathy and communication. I continued mentoring rising leaders within the organization, particularly those who had faced obstacles similar to my own earlier in life. Seeing their growth and success was deeply rewarding, a reminder that leadership is not just about individual achievement, but about lifting others as you climb. As we navigated these complexities, our client base diversified and expanded globally. New partnerships in Europe and Asia opened exciting doors, challenging us to adapt culturally and operationally. It was exhilarating and humbling, proof that our vision resonated beyond borders. Looking back, the path had been anything but easy. From being sidelined at Summit Tech to leading a global enterprise, the journey tested every ounce of resilience, patience, and courage I had. But it also confirmed my belief that integrity, strategic thinking, and people-centered leadership are the true keys to lasting success. Each challenge we faced strengthened our foundation, shaping a company prepared not just to survive, but to thrive in the future. And as the horizon continued to expand, I felt ready, not only to meet what came next, but to lead the way. Years into leading Horizon Capital and Pinnacle Systems, I often find myself reflecting on the winding path that brought me here. From the early days of launching new products to navigating boardroom battles and reclaiming my place in the industry, the journey has been as challenging as it has been rewarding. What stands out most is how every setback, every moment of doubt, shaped the leader I became. Being pushed out of Summit Tech was painful, but it forced me to reevaluate what leadership truly means. It taught me that success isn't measured only by titles or numbers, but by the integrity, vision, and resilience we bring to the work. Today, I'm proud to lead an organization built on those principles, one that values people, innovation, and long-term impact. Watching the team grow, clients succeed, and industry standards shift because of our efforts is deeply fulfilling. Yet, I know this is just the beginning. The technology landscape will continue evolving at a dizzying pace, bringing new challenges and opportunities. My commitment remains to steer the company with humility, adaptability, and unwavering dedication to our core values. I also remain passionate about mentoring the next generation of leaders, especially those who face obstacles similar to what I encountered. I believe that by sharing our stories and supporting one another, we can build a more inclusive, innovative, and compassionate industry. As I look ahead, I'm excited for what the future holds. There is so much more to build, learn, and achieve. The legacy isn't just about what I've done, but what we create together moving forward. In the end, leadership is about more than power or prestige. It's about making a meaningful difference, standing firm in your values, and inspiring others to do the same. And with that, the journey continues. If Daniel's journey taught us anything, it's that true leadership is about resilience, integrity, and unwavering belief in your vision, even when the odds are against you. Whether you're facing challenges in your career or striving to reclaim your path, remember, the power to rewrite your story lies within you. Stand firm, lead with purpose, and never let anyone define your worth. Now, it's your turn to take that first step. What legacy will you create?